The deafening, joyful roar of 3,000 proud parents echoed from the massive high school football stadium, vibrating through the closed windows of my car. I was 45 years old, sitting completely alone in the driver's seat across the street, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had turned stark white. Through a pair of heavy binoculars, I watched my beautiful 18-year-old niece, Maya, walk across the brightly lit stage in her cap and gown to receive her diploma. I should have been sitting in the front row. I had spent the last 18 years of my life secretly sacrificing my own comfort to build a massive $120,000 college fund for her. But exactly 3 days ago, her greedy, deeply arrogant parents had formally banned me from the graduation ceremony and completely cut me out of her life. Why? Because I absolutely flat-out refused to hand over my life savings to them so they could buy themselves a brand new $90,000 luxury sports car. Welcome back to the Wise Chronicles. We are constantly conditioned to believe that family members always have each other's best interests at heart, and that parents will naturally sacrifice absolutely everything for the success and future of their children. We are told to respect the hierarchy of the family tree and surrender our boundaries to keep the peace. But what happens when the people who brought a child into the world view that child not as a human being but as a financial pawn? What do you do when your own brother and sister-in-law try to violently steal their daughter's future just to fund their toxic, superficial lifestyle? Today's story is a breathtaking, utterly devastating masterclass in unearthing the darkest family greed, executing impenetrable legal strategies, and delivering the most flawless, absolute financial karma ever recorded. It is the story of a devoted aunt who was treated like an absolute peasant, and the terrifying, devastating reality check she unleashed from the deck of a luxury cruise ship. If you believe that true love is about protecting the innocent, and that absolute karma always bankrupts the greedy, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You do not want to miss the unbelievable true stories we share here on the Wise Chronicles. Now let's go back to that tense, incredibly toxic family dynamic, where a loving aunt stopped arguing and an absolute queen woke up. My name is Eleanor. I am 45 years old, happily unmarried and completely independent. My entire life has been built on quiet, grueling, unbreakable hard work. I am a mid-level manager at a logistics firm. I don't wear designer clothes. I drive a reliable 10-year-old sedan, and I live in a modest, paid-off suburban home. I am naturally frugal, but my greatest, most profound joy in this world has always been my niece Maya. My older brother Greg and his wife Brenda are the exact, terrifying opposite of me. Greg and Brenda valued only one thing in this entire universe: superficial appearances. They were entirely consumed by the illusion of high society. They desperately wanted to look incredibly wealthy, but they absolutely refused to live within their means. Their entire life was a carefully curated fake social media profile. They leased expensive luxury cars they couldn't afford. They took lavish vacations to the Bahamas on high-interest credit cards, and Brenda routinely spent thousands of dollars on designer handbags while dodging calls from debt collectors. In the middle of this absolute financial chaos was Maya. Maya was brilliant, kind, and incredibly hardworking. She didn't care about designer labels. She spent her high school years studying late into the night, desperately trying to earn a scholarship so she could escape her parents' toxic, superficial world. When Maya was born, I made a silent, unbreakable vow. I knew Greg and Brenda would never save a single dollar for her education. They would spend it all on themselves. So I went to my bank and secretly opened a dedicated investment account. For 18 straight years, every single time I got a paycheck, I quietly transferred a portion into that account. I skipped expensive vacations. I packed my own lunches. I invested the money aggressively but smartly. Over almost 2 decades, that secret account grew into a massive, life-changing $120,000 college fund. I never told anyone. Not Greg, not Brenda, and not even Maya. I was waiting for the absolute perfect moment. Her high school graduation day. Maya's hard work paid off. She was accepted into a highly prestigious, top-tier university. But the tuition was incredibly expensive, and she hadn't secured enough scholarship money to cover the massive housing and living costs. She was terrified of drowning in student loan debt. I was so incredibly excited to finally hand her the keys to her absolute freedom. But I made one massive, fatal miscalculation. A week before the graduation ceremony, I was sitting at my kitchen table reviewing the final bank statements for the college fund. I had stupidly left the folder on the counter, when Greg and Brenda unexpectedly dropped by my house to borrow some money for a caterer they hired for Maya's graduation party. While I was in the kitchen brewing coffee, Brenda snooped through my papers. When I walked back into the living room, Brenda was holding the bank statement. Her eyes were wide with absolute unfiltered greed. Greg was standing next to her, staring at the number at the bottom of the page, $120,000. "Eleanor," Greg said, his voice trembling with excitement, "what is this? You have $120,000 sitting in liquid cash." I quickly snatched the paper out of Brenda's hands, my heart pounding. "That is none of your business," I said coldly. "But if you must know, it is a college fund I have been secretly saving for Maya since the day she was born. I am giving it to her on graduation day." Brenda and Greg looked at each other. They didn't smile. They didn't thank me for securing their daughter's future. The absolute darkest, most sociopathic greed took over their entire minds. "That is ridiculous, Eleanor," Brenda scoffed, crossing her arms with breathtaking arrogance. "Maya doesn't need $120,000 handed to her. She can just take out federal student loans like everyone else. It builds character." "Exactly," Greg chimed in, stepping closer to me, trying to use his physical size to intimidate me. "Brenda and I have sacrificed our entire youth raising that girl. We deserve a reward. We have our eyes on a brand new $90,000 Range Rover, and we need to pay off some credit cards. You are going to transfer that money directly to our joint checking account tomorrow morning. We are her parents. We control the finances." I stared at them, completely paralyzed by the sheer unadulterated sociopathy of their words. They wanted to completely steal 18 years of my hard work and plunge their own brilliant daughter into massive, crippling debt, just so they could drive a luxury SUV to impress people on the internet. "You are out of your absolute minds," I said, my voice echoing with devastating cold authority. "You are not touching a single penny of this money. It is for Maya's education and Maya's education only. Get out of my house." Brenda's face turned violently red. The fake polite sister-in-law completely vanished, and the cornered, desperate monster finally showed its face. "If you don't wire us that money by tomorrow, Eleanor," Brenda screamed, pointing a shaking manicured finger in my face, "you are completely dead to us. You are banned from the graduation. You are banned from the party. And I will make sure Maya never speaks to you for the rest of your miserable, lonely life." "Try me," I whispered. They stormed out of my house, slamming the door so hard the pictures rattled on the wall. They thought I would break. They thought my profound love for Maya would force me to surrender the money, just to maintain access to her. They thought I would write the check to keep the peace. They were completely, fatally wrong. The grieving, heartbroken aunt completely died in that living room, and a fierce, fiercely protective, deeply calculated financial strategist took the wheel. I didn't call them and scream. I didn't cry. I picked up my phone and called my corporate estate attorney. The very next morning, I walked into the lawyer's downtown office. I didn't just hide the money. I executed a flawless, impenetrable legal fortress. I transferred the entire $120,000 into a strict, irrevocable educational trust. I named Maya as the absolute sole beneficiary, and I appointed my ruthless attorney as the sole executor. The trust bylaws explicitly stated that the funds could only be disbursed directly to a university for tuition or directly to Maya's personal account for living expenses. Furthermore, it included an ironclad clause. Greg and Brenda were legally barred from ever accessing, managing, or requesting a single cent of the trust. If they tried, the lawyer was instructed to file immediate harassment charges. But I didn't stop there. I was exhausted. I had spent 18 years working and saving. It was time for my own reward. I walked directly from the lawyer's office to a high-end travel agency. I used a portion of my own separate personal savings to book an absolute, once-in-a-lifetime luxury experience. I booked a 6-month all-inclusive first-class world cruise. I was going to see Europe, Asia, and the Mediterranean. I packed my bags, locked up my house, and left a thick, sealed envelope with my attorney, with strict instructions to deliver it to Maya on the afternoon of her graduation. That brings us directly back to the stadium, where I sat in my car watching my niece graduate through binoculars. When the ceremony ended, I didn't go to the toxic fake graduation party Greg and Brenda were throwing to show off to their friends. I drove directly to the international airport. I boarded a massive, luxurious cruise ship, turned my phone completely off, and ordered a glass of expensive champagne as the ship sailed into the open ocean. While I was looking at the beautiful sunset, absolute nuclear chaos was erupting back on land. At 4 p.m., while Greg and Brenda were schmoozing with their friends at the party, a sleek black town car pulled up to their house. My attorney stepped out. He walked directly up to Maya, completely ignoring Greg and Brenda, and handed her the thick envelope. Maya opened it in front of everyone. Inside was a letter from me, explaining exactly how much I loved her, how proud I was, and revealing the $120,000 educational trust that meant she would graduate debt-free. But the letter also exposed the absolute horrifying truth. I detailed exactly how her parents had demanded the money to buy a luxury SUV, how they had tried to steal her future, and how they had banned me from her graduation for refusing to fund their greed. Maya's hands began to shake violently. She looked up at her parents, tears streaming down her face, her eyes filled with absolute unfiltered disgust. Greg and Brenda completely panicked. They tried to grab the legal documents out of her hands, desperately claiming I was a liar and that the money belonged to them as her guardians. But the attorney stepped forward, completely humiliating them in front of all their high society friends. If either of you attempt to touch this trust or coerce Maya into accessing it for your personal use, the lawyer announced with devastating authority, I will have you both arrested for financial extortion by the end of the day. The fake wealthy illusion Greg and Brenda had spent years building completely violently collapsed right there in the living room. Their friends whispered and stared at them in absolute horror. Maya didn't scream. She walked upstairs, packed her entire life into 2 suitcases, and walked out the front door. She didn't look back. She used the spare key I had left her and moved directly into my quiet, peaceful house. For the next 6 months, I woke up in Italy, Greece, and Japan. I drank fine wine. I read books by the ocean, and I ignored the hundreds of frantic, furious voicemails from my brother and sister-in-law. When I finally returned home, deeply rested and incredibly happy, Maya was waiting for me in my kitchen, studying for her university midterms. Greg and Brenda were completely destroyed. Without my money, they couldn't afford the luxury SUV. Their massive credit card debts finally caught up with them, and their leased cars were violently repossessed in the middle of the night. Maya completely cut them out of her life, refusing to speak to the parents who tried to sell her future for a steering wheel. We are constantly pressured to prioritize toxic family members over our own dignity and the safety of the innocent. We are told to keep the peace, to write the checks, and to let arrogant people manipulate the future just to avoid drama. But true love requires absolute, impenetrable boundaries. When the people you share blood with try to steal from a child to fund their own greed, you do not sit quietly and negotiate. You build an absolute legal fortress, you pack your bags, and you let their entire fake empire burn to the ground while you sail into the sunset. What would you have done if your brother demanded your life savings to buy a luxury car? Would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have locked the money in a trust and gone on a world cruise exactly like Eleanor did? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If this breathtaking story of silent dignity, absolute boundaries, and devastating beautiful karma made you cheer, please hit that like button and share this video. And be sure to subscribe to the Wise Chronicles for more incredible, true stories of survival, exposing the truth and rewriting your own ending. Thank you so much for listening. Always protect your peace, and I will see you in the next one.